record. And let me share my screen and my slides. So let me get this going. Now, just to note, when I share my whole screen, I'm not going to be able to see any comments. There's the tunnel. I'm not going to be able to see your comments when I go to the PowerPoint presentation because I'm working off one screen where I am tonight. So if you've got something to say, please just like unmute and shout at me, and I will quite literally not mind at all. And you're welcome to interrupt and query anything. Just unmute. So yeah, if you type something in the chat box, I might miss it. Before I do get started though, are there any questions anyone wants to ask? Any queries, anything bugging you? Anyone you're just feeling not sure about anything? Any questions? Thanks, Shanice. Okay, in that case, let me start a share screen. It's a pleasure, Ilana.
Hi,
enjoyed
Tim,
it
sorry.
again. Yes, go ahead.
On my work breakdown structure, I'm not 100% sure. It feels like I've put in too much information. It just feels like I put in too much information because even if I try to edit anything now, my word just like freezes. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is all looking right. I did my 3 levels. So I started at the top, obviously with the project name. My second level, I used my phases, and on the phases, I put in estimates and I put in dates. You know, from start to end dates. And then on my third level, I entered in under each phase what's going to happen and you know how it's going to happen, my procurement, my project planning, stuff like that. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, yeah, it does. But just remember, as long as the work of the project is broken down into its specific activities, so, or at least has, yeah, the deliverables and what, and then even for some of the deliverables, you could take a couple of those and show what activities you'd have to undertake to make those deliverables happen. So for example, let's say we are designing a new piece of software for an organization, and one of the deliverables would be a finalized spec sheet or a software specification sheet for that. That would be the deliverable, finalized software spec. But under that, how do you go about getting that? And it might involve consulting with the staff. And what's involved in that? You need to, you know, set dates, choose a venue, or use an online survey system to get feedback from the staff, like SurveyMonkey. In other words, what particular tasks are you going to do? You know, you'd have to book a venue, invite the relevant staff to the workshop, hold the workshop, write the minutes of the workshop, and compile that into a finalized spec sheet. Let's say you were doing that for a new piece of company software for your staff. You see what I mean by unpacking some of the activities. So now, just to caution or to make it a little bit less of a burden, I'm not expecting, you know, detailed activities for every single chunk of work in the project, but I would like to see some sample of that level of detail and thinking for some of the deliverables to show that you've thought through. Okay.
No,
so that's why it actually requires 4 levels.
You see, that's the thing. I still needed to add a 4th level, but I couldn't because I can't insert any more information.
Okay. Well, if you want to either create a second file, And then also, I mean, it's not like on the work breakdown structure, you have to show all the dates and all the costs and so on. It just, because the
I
work
only did
breakdown
that in
structure,
my second level.
okay, that's fine. Then below that,
Yeah,
you would just
there's no
give
costs and
an
stuff. Yeah.
activity name and possibly a number for it. So, you know,
Yes, 1.1 project planning, stuff like that.
yeah,
Yes.
and then
Okay.
activity 2.3.7 or whatever it is,
Yes.
and number the boxes in the correct numbering system. It's a great question.
Yes. Yeah,
Thanks.
that's
Yeah,
fine. Okay.
good
All
stuff.
right. Great. Thanks.
Cool. Okie dokes. Then if there's nothing else, then let me launch into sharing my screen, or rather my slides. So this constitutes the national support session for task 2 of your assignment. So this is project management and admin, PRMA5122w, and we're on the 23rd of May 2022. Just to recap again, as it says at the bottom, the ICE tasks need to be in by the end of this Friday, about 23:59, so like midnight this coming Friday, the end of Friday, the 27th of May. Assignments must be in by 9 p.m. on their due date, and the due date for this task 2 of the POE is 30th of May, so that's a week away. And then the final task is 2 weeks later. I have requested a change to that date for the final task because of the close, just 2 weeks between task 2 and the final task, but I haven't yet had a reply. I'm going to chase up on that this week. But don't bank on it. Please, can you move forward on the basis that your final task will still be due on the 15th of June until you hear definite confirmation of otherwise, because there's every chance the powers that be will turn around and say, no, we're not shifting that date. But task 2, which is what we're working on primarily now, is definitely due on next Monday, the 30th of May. Also, please note, what was I going to add? No, that's that's it for now in terms of due dates. Okay, so what I wanted to add was what I'm going to cover tonight is largely a repeat of the last session I did. I'm going to whiz through it a little bit quicker, but I'm also going to just jump in and give at the end a short intro to the main question in your final task, because it's just 2 weeks after, it's basically 3 weeks away that it's due. So I'd like to give you a heads up on what's expected for the main task of the main question, which is the risk table in your final task of the POE. But let's kick off by just doing what's due next week. There's a work breakdown structure, a budget, a Gantt chart, and a network diagram with a critical path analysis, making up the total of 100 marks. So the work breakdown structure, as we said, the following is the mark breakdown structure. Level 0 to 3, so there must be 4 levels in total. Level 0 is basically your title, the title of your project, or the main box at the top. Then levels 1 and 2. Level 1 can be your main deliverables, or even possibly phases. Level 2 would be your sub-deliverables or objectives, and then level 3 would be specific activities that go into that. So, have you thought through the detailed activities of your project? And as I've just said in response to the question, I'm not expecting, the activity or task level, the bottom level of your WBS. I'm not expecting that to include the whole project, because that would be, quite comprehensive for big projects like this. But I am expecting to see some sample of that. What I've said in the past, and this was prior to the way the questions were formulated in this assignment, but in years past, when the assignment was different, I used to say, do the work breakdown structure, show, your main project title, then the deliverables underneath that, and then choose one of those and unpack it into its detail, and then choose one of that level and unpack it into the subsequent detail. That's not quite the same here, but I'm just saying you can do a sample at the task level, provided it's showing at least a good handful of examples of detailed activities. So as it says there, specific deliverables from the charter are included. Work packages and activities are listed for each deliverable, and there's overall, the 4 marks for overall adequacy is just a kind of 4 marks to play with, to say, for me in assessing it, to say, yeah, it's overall a good, bad, or ugly work breakdown structure. Okay, so the preferred format is that of an organogram. See pages 87 to 91 of the textbook, and also do some basic research. Let me just share this thing up, put this thing out the way. Some examples. Well, I'm going to come to that just now. So just to highlight, the purpose of a work breakdown structure is to understand in detail, as I've said, the work involved in achieving the scope of work, and from this detailed breakdown of the work to be able to accurately estimate and plan for the budget and schedule. So the more detail you have in your work breakdown structure, the more valuable it becomes later for planning and compiling the durations of all the activities and deliverables, the resources you need for those activities, the cost of each of those activities, what each of those activities has in the way of risk, what you have to buy as procurement, what you have to buy for each of those activities or hire in, and it helps you build the Gantt chart well and do your critical path analysis. So, your work breakdown structure is really the heart of your project planning, and it's the building block of everything else. That's why I emphasize it so much, and it's so important. So here's a couple of examples, as we've said here, and let me see if my pen is going to work on this screen. So that would be here, and let's change the color again. Let me put it into red. Here would be what's called level 0, which is your project title. Then this is level 1, this is level 2, and down here is level 3. Okay, so as it says here, your project kind of project title goes there. High level requirements will define deliverable number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then under that would be your sub deliverables. And this is looking nice and symmetrical with like 3 under each one. In reality, that wouldn't be the case. But here are specific measurable activities and tasks you have to do, like phoning the clients, or booking the venue, or meeting with the architect, or getting quotes from suppliers. That's where these specific activities come in. They're measurable. In other words, when you say meet with the architect to finalize the design, that means that we know for that activity, meet with the architect, that's going to take 3 hours, a 3-hour meeting. Therefore, it's going to cost, plus it's going to cost a 3-hour meeting with the architect and whatever else, and transport to the venue, whatever else. That might come out at, say, 6,000 Rand for that specific. We know that that's going to cost 6. And that might cost 3,000 Rand, and this might cost 2,000 Rand, which means if you add those up, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's it. This one here is going to cost 11,000 Rand. And if we have a cost for this one and a cost for this one, we can add those all up and get a summary cost for this item here. And so you add all of those up. You see why the work breakdown structure is important? Because at the detailed level, you put in your detail at each little task you have to do, and that makes it incredibly easy just to sum this all up. And the software does it, by the way. If you're using decent software, I'm not saying doing it manually like the way most of you guys are doing it, it wouldn't add it up automatically. But any decent project management software, when you put in values on each of these items for time, as well as how long, how many hours or days it's going to take. There might be certain tasks that take a number of days. You add all of that up, and suddenly you've got your project duration for the whole project. Okay. Well, actually, first you need to, for duration, you need to sequence everything and do your network diagram for that, because duration doesn't just get added up like money does. Okay, so that's one example. Here's another example: phase 1, phase 2, deliverable 1, 2, 3. Sorry, 1 and 2, deliverable 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and under its specific tasks or work packages. And again, here you would be able to put in a rand amount, etc. Here's an example from a submission a couple of years ago. It was a medication reminder mobile app, phase 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was done in phases. And then you could, here they've assigned who's responsible for each of these ones with a budget attached to these amounts. And then again, under it, showing the specific tasks: install hardware, conduct a risk assessment, document lessons learned, schedule meeting with the client. So it's a good set of tasks that are put in there. Okay, so that sort of Gantt chart, that sort of work breakdown structure that's showing here, the fact that it's carefully thought through, carefully numbered, shows relevant detail in some of the cases, like there's summary budget figures. I'm not expecting a budget figure next to every single box, but it's showing you here that the logic is flowing through. So, you know, this is 20 plus 20 makes 40, and so on. So it's a clear, nice, logical work breakdown structure that shows that the person has thought through everything carefully. And here's another one. It was a Indaba networking dinner. There was, you know, activities around the venue, the marketing, accommodation, flights and transport, and so on. Who's going to be doing what, in what phase it happens. So that's the way they've shown it here. And it puts it all together. Not quite as much detail as the previous one, but it gives a good indication. Okay, then question 2 is the budget. Using the work breakdown structure created in question 1, pick a work package or activity. So choose something and complete the following. Determine the budget for this. So show, and it's for 10 marks. So you need to show some detail. So choose an activity that requires a little bit of effort and purchasing of equipment or hiring equipment, buying materials. You know, choose something that's got a little bit of meat to it, and show the budget breakdown for that. And then you must justify the budget by attaching supporting documents, screenshots, etc. of price lists, and provide lists from at least 3 different service providers or sellers, which is price lists or quotes, for any 2 resources budgeted for. Now, if you've got some work packages, if you don't have one work package that's got enough detail in it to show a decent bit of budget detail, then do a combination of things. And if I can go back to a previous slide, you know, you might want to actually choose at this level, I'm going to show how I budgeted this, this, and this. Or you might want to choose, you know, any of these and say, where did the budget come from these 3 things? But again, try to choose something that's got some detail and substance to it, instead of just, you know, organized meeting. Or it might be organized meeting, but that meeting involves hiring a venue, doing catering for that meeting, and, you know, hiring equipment for, you know, data projector and a sound system or something like that. So, and then you get quotes and show some quotes for that. Okay. So hopefully that's a bit clearer. Then,
Sorry, Tim.
Yes, please. Yes, chip in.
Sorry, on the budget, on
Yeah.
say with the 2.2, you say we must get some quotes. Can this be made up ourselves, or
Yes.
is it? Okay, I'm
Yes.
just double checking.
You can choose. So you can either get real quotes, or you can make up, you know, 3 or 4 quotes from made-up service providers. All I give as guidance is that it must be vaguely realistic, the figures. So, you know, organizing flights, let's say the activity involved flying from, as I've said before, Joburg to Cape Town. You know, you're not going to be charging 40,000 Rand per person return flight. You know, and likewise, you're not going to be charging 40 Rand per person return from Cape Town to Joburg and back, or whatever it is. So,
okay, great stuff.
but by the same token, just to caution everyone, or to make life a bit easier, I'm not going to go and check against real prices. As I've said before, I'm not going to go and check this budget against real price. If you've made stuff up and it sounds vaguely realistic, I'm happy with that. I'm not going to go actually and say, oh, you know, well, your quote said 2,400 Rand, but it's actually 2,627 Rand. I'm not going to do that. It's you know, just provided it's roughly in the right ballpark, it sounds fine. Is that all right?
Cool. Yes, great stuff. Thanks.
Okay. So then question 3, which is the Gantt chart. Using project management software, create a Gantt chart for all of the activities in the work breakdown structure. And this, by the way, is worth 50 marks, which is the main chunk of work for this task. Now, the Gantt chart should have at least 20 activities. Okay, that's kind of a minimum it should have. You know, it shouldn't go on for hundreds and hundreds. In many big projects, in reality, you're going to have you know, hundreds of activities. I had a friend who used to, some years ago, he basically ran MS Project for one of the big construction companies. And I asked him once, how many lines of activities does he have on a typical Gantt chart within MS Project? And he said for, you know, for their kind of regular projects where they're doing housing developments and stuff like that, it'd be 500 or 600 lines of activities. But he then said they did the Suncoast Casino and Hotel development on Durban's beachfront, and that was 3,500 lines of activities in a Gantt chart. So that gives you some indication of the levels of complexity that these guys work with in big projects. But then you're using software that's designed to deal with all of that, and it tracks all of those activities, the costs of them, the resources, the cost of the resources. And it does everything. So what I'm expecting here is to take your work breakdown structure and put it into a Gantt chart format. So working from the WBS, put it into a Gantt chart showing at least 20 activities. Should show working and non-working days. Now, typically that would just be Monday to Friday would be your working days. That's our standard format in this country. You might, if for some reason, want to add Saturday or half a day on Saturday, if that was your sort of context. So activity list for 10 marks there. Start and end dates for each of the activities. Dependencies or predecessors, which is the links, those must show and make sense. The phases, summary, tasks, and deliverables, those must show. The resources have been assigned to each activity, and some milestones you should show at least, I would say, 5 to 6 milestones. And so let's just have a look at what this looks like. So here's it was a Finnish festival for a color run. Here you've got a summary task. This number 1 here, planning and logistics, which shows as this gray line here. And under it are its specific activities that happen here. Each of these blue lines are specific activities. Now, you've got milestones showing here, kickoff meeting, and this represents the end of planning. However, this would have been marked down a bit because there's no link. This milestone is actually in the wrong place. If it comes at the end of the planning phase, then that milestone should sit here. And flow from these activities. Okay, so the links don't always make sense here. In this example I'm showing you. Now the summary task with its activities, all the links showing. Let's just zoom in. This is a zoom in of the top left-hand corner of this one I've just shown you. So you've got your activities, summary tasks, and it flowing through. Okay. So, oh, sorry. That ought to wake us all up. So that's the one example. Here's another example with a bit more detail in it. You've got different colors for the different phases of the project, blue and then a darker blue and so on. Quite a lot of detail in terms of activities showing here. Dates for each of the, start and finish dates for every activity. And then you've got the resources. So there's an accounts manager, facilities manager, food and beverage manager, etc. All of these guys, production managers responsible for this task. Sound and lights manager. I'm just trying to see if there's one that has any non-human resources. I can't see that. And again, this is a zoom in of the same activity. You've got all your link lines, your dependency lines showing. So it shows that this activity is dependent on the one above because there's that line that joins them there. And there's a little milestone showing, a little yellow diamond. It says here venue approval meeting with client. Okay, so that's just approval of the venue involves a short meeting with the client. Okay, so that's a typical good Gantt chart layout from Team Gantt. Then okay, any questions on Gantt charts from anyone?
Sorry, Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, I can hear you.
I wanted to ask about the Gantt chart. The Gantt charts, like within the whole project, do we hand it in by itself, or how does it work?
You print it to a PDF. Okay, so
Okay.
if are you using Team Gantt?
I will be, yes.
Okay, so if you're using Team Gantt, when you
Yes.
finish putting the whole thing together,
Okay.
you go to it's menu. I think it is menu, and in fact, let me call it up now quickly. Let me just pause the this, and I'm assuming you can still see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to Team Gantt. Let me just log in. It should hopefully have the same rough thing that I've had before. It's a bit slow because I'm also connected on the meeting. Sorry about the delay.
It's okay, Tim.
Let's see how this goes. Come on, come on, come on. I'm just going to stop sharing this. Oh no, here we go, here we go. Just as I said that. Okay, here's a project that I did as a example project for one of our sessions. Might have been with the other group. This is when I wish I lived in Europe and had a high-speed internet link. You can get a high-speed internet link here, but it costs a fortune. So,
yeah, my one friend in Panama has a 1 gig line.
you.
Yeah,
It's got to be nice.
insane.
It's got to be nice. Come on, come on, come on. Here we go. If you see in the top left here, it says menu. Let's just let the thing load. Phew. Okay, here it is. So you've got your activities and whatever. So if I go to menu and you say at the bottom, print export to PDF, it comes up with another window. Now, what I would suggest you do is just experiment, play around a bit. You could change the paper size maybe to A3. It's landscape. There's some advanced options. You might want to make the task details say large, and so on. And then you say view PDF, and then it puts it out to a PDF, which you then download, and then you upload that with your assignment submission. Does that make sense? Because you can upload multiple files in one assignment submission.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I can't recall how to do that, but there is a way to, when you do assignment submission, to attach not just one file, but
Yes.
you know, I have some students who put in 3 or 4 files. So you can have
Okay.
one showing you can have a file with a PDF showing your work breakdown structure layout. You can have another one for your Gantt chart, and then the main text
Yes.
of your assignment is contained in
Yes.
the kind of Word document. So,
Yes.
and you can even print that to PDF. So it's up to you.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Tim. Okay.
Pleasure. Okay, let me get out of here. I'll go back to this thing. Okay, so we've got here okay, I'm going to carry on, but if you've got questions, please just shout. Then the network diagram, and this is what I wanted again to spend a bit of time on, is to generate a network diagram and identify the critical path for 5 marks. So the network diagram and critical path is for 5 marks, and then it says provide an understanding of the critical path in relation to your project and explain it through the generated Gantt chart, how any changes to the critical path would affect the duration of the project. So include screenshots of different duration values to indicate the changes and effect to the timeline, both negative and positive outcomes. So what they're asking you is to show your understanding of critical path by doing a couple of variations within your project. Now, what I'm suggesting, and I said this at the end of showing all of the critical path slides last time, is that you take a small section of your project, not the whole project, but take a section of your project and do the network diagram for that and the critical path for that, and then show how variations within that would work. So I'm not expecting a network diagram for the whole project. That would be very complex, especially for any project that's, you know, vaguely real world based. And again, the software would do that for you. And it's not a lot of project people who are interested in seeing the network diagram, but this is more to explain and understand what the software is doing when it tells you what the critical path is. And that's why this is important and vital. So the visual layout, to see the network diagram, it doesn't always make that much sense, but it's the way you get to the critical path that you need to understand, and why we need a critical path analysis. So that's what this question revolves around, because it is a key part of good project management to understand what is on the critical path and why it is on the critical path. So I'm planning, and I'm just going to go through these slides again, involves breaking down the work, as we've said, into, okay, now it's changed to black ink. We wonder why. Okay, so the work breakdown structure, you first break down the work as we've just done. Then you did identify all the dependencies, the sequence in which they must happen, and I'll come back to that now. Then you establish the durations and account for resources. And as I'm saying, resources can sometimes affect durations, and durations can sometimes affect resources. Very simple example, if I want to paint a classroom at a school, I can get one painter and he might take 2, or she might take 2 days to do that classroom. If I get 2 painters, will that classroom only take 1 day to paint? If I get 4 painters, will they take half a day to do it, and then I could get 8 painters and they do it in a quarter of a day, and so it goes on. Now at some point it doesn't work anymore. You can have 100 painters in one classroom. It won't work. They'll be fighting with each other in such a small space. But that's what we mean by resources and durations affecting each other. And sometimes if a task is very critical to the project, then it's a case of finding more resources to have it finish in time. Other times you've got an activity where the resource is limited. You've only got one of those or two of those, and so you can't do it in any quicker time than you have the resources in which to finish it. So that's what that link is about. Then you would draw the network diagram and analyze the critical path. So, and the critical path would look something like this. Start of the project, activity A, activity B, activity C, activity D, activity E, and that's the end of the project when all of those are done. Okay, so how does that work in real time? Firstly, this is again another example of the Gantt chart, and it shows you these lines. This is from MS Project, by the way. These lines are representing the sequence in which things happen. You've got a set of activities, how long each of them takes, and then the software, once you've worked out, given your predecessor, which is, oh, here's the predecessor. So what it's saying here, activity C, do you see its predecessor is activity 1, which is A. So C cannot start until A, this is C, C cannot start till A has finished. Then activity D is dependent on activity 3, which is C. So if this is C and this is D, then as you can see, there's a link there. And also E is dependent on C. So there's an arrow down to there as well. So that's what this Gantt chart is showing with its links. And you would have a network diagram to show that. Dependencies, I'm not going to chat through this tonight. The main dependency and the common one which we always use is finish to start. A must finish before B can start. And that's really pretty much the only one we use. There are some exceptions. The other one is a start to start, but these other two don't show up very often at all. So we have here 6 activities, A, B, C, D, E, F. How long each of them is going to take in days: 5 days, 5 days, 15 days, 5, 5, and 10 days. Then we've got the dependencies. A comes at the start of the project, B comes at the start, C is dependent on A, D is dependent on B, E is dependent also on B, which means, like for all of these, E cannot start until B finishes. D cannot start until B finishes. And then lastly, F, which takes 10 days, cannot start until both C and D are finished. Okay, so C and D must be finished before F can start. So let's have a network diagram to show that. All I've done is taken this table and drawn it out. And the way you do it is you start off by just on a rough pencil and paper or pen and paper, scrap paper, start drawing it. And you'll soon see the way it starts to flow. And then you might need to do a second version or a third version because lines are crossing and you can show it more neatly. But this is a simple project. Activity A, B, C is dependent on A. In other words, C cannot start till A is finished. D cannot start till B is finished. E cannot start till B is finished. So it comes out like there. And then, as we said just now, F is dependent on C and D, so it's got to flow from both of those, and it cannot start till both of those are finished. So that's, in an essence, that is a network diagram. We haven't yet done any critical path analysis. That is simply the network diagram for this project. Okay, it visually shows you the sequence of activities. It doesn't yet tell us how long the project is going to take. Then we start with what's called a forward sweep or forward pass, determine how soon it would be completed, and we start working with the top line, which is this line here, which is the earliest start and the earliest finish for each activity. That's the early start, early finish. When is the earliest this activity can start, and therefore when is the earliest it can finish for each activity, and we follow it through. So this is the top line of everything. Okay, so where do we start here? And you start with a 0 at the beginning. If that's 0, now early finish, let me just write the formula in the top left here. Early finish is equal to early start plus duration. Okay, so 0 plus 5 is 5. Okay, that means the next activity is going to start then, and 5 plus 15 is 20. Now we can't work out this one yet because we haven't worked out this sequence of activities. Okay, so let me just fill in those. Then we come to here. This also starts on day 0. This has got 5, so it's going to be, remember, our early finish equals early start plus duration. Remember that formula. So this is 5 because it flows from here. 5 plus 5 is 10. Okay, we can also work out this one because E comes after B. B finishes on day 5, therefore E can start on day 5, and this would be day 10. Okay, now we can work out F. So let me just get to there. Now we can work out F's early start. What is the early start of F? It's either 10 or 20. Now, when you're doing a forward pass, you must always take the biggest value. Okay, so 20 or 10, the biggest value is 20. So you put 20 in there. Why? Because you've got to wait for 5 days here plus 15 days here makes a total of 20 days for these two, for A and C to be done. B and D can be done in 10 days because it's 5 days plus 5 days. But you can't start F on day 10 or 11 because you're still waiting for A and C to finish. So it has to be the bigger value. Okay, so that becomes day 20, 20 plus 10, and this becomes day 30. So the project is going to take 30 days. Now let's just cross-check because we haven't finished this one yet. We've said E follows after B, so that's going to be 5 plus 5 would be 10. Okay, there's our 10. Now, the total project time, okay, the total project duration equals 30 days. That's how long it's going to take. So we finished our forward pass, and we know that the project is going to take 30 days to complete, 30 working days or 6 weeks. Now, if I show that on a chart here, I've got just, this is a very simple Gantt chart showing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. This is day 6, day 7, day 11, 12, etc. up to day 30. Activity A goes from day 1 to 5. Activity B also goes from day 1 to 5. C follows after A and takes 15 days, takes us to day 20. D follows B and takes 5 days, so it takes us to day 10. E follows after D, okay? Sorry, not after D, it follows after B and takes 5 days. And then F must wait for D to be finished and C to be finished, which means it can't start here, it can only start here, which comes in there. And therefore it ends, it's a 10-day activity, it ends on day 30. So that's a Gantt chart view of what we've done so far. Then we have to do what's called the backward pass, the backward sweep. And we work from day 30, because if a project can be finished in 30 days, then we want it finished in day 30. Now what we're starting with here is our latest finish, and working backwards, we want the latest start. Okay, so this is the latest finish of activity D and latest start of activity D. So we're going to work along the bottom row of every activity and work our way back, starting at the end of the project. So as I said, we start with day 30 here. Now, the formula here is late start equals late finish minus duration. Okay, 30 minus 10 is 20. Now, if F can start on day 20. When must this be finished by? That must be finished by day 20. Let's go down to do activity D. If F can finish on day 20, then D, which feeds into F, can be finished on that day. That becomes a 20 there. Okay. Let's just work back from here on C. 20 minus 15 is 5. That goes to 5. 5 minus 5 gives us day 0. So let me just fill that in. We've got to here. Then, as I said, we work back from the right-hand side again, following the arrows backwards. So this becomes a 20. Why? Because we can finish it on day 20 and not delay F. It could start on 20 and go through to day 30, and we still finished on time. 20 minus 5 becomes 15. Now we can't work out B yet because B feeds into D and E, and because we're working backwards, we must first work out E. Okay, so let me just go fill that in. We've got these filled in now. Now, when's the last day, and I asked this last time, when's the last day we can finish activity? It's actually day 30. Why? Because nothing comes after activity E. There's no activity that comes after activity E. Okay, there's nothing after it. It can finish on the very last day of the project, and the project will still finish on time. So this is actually day 30. 30 minus 5 is 25. And now we've got, working back into activity B, we've got E and D. Okay, working backwards. E and D. Now, when you work backwards, okay, if you're doing a backward pass, then you take the smaller value, not the bigger value. You take the smaller of two values. If you've got two or more activities coming out of one, you take the smaller one on a backward pass. So that's 25. This is 15. You've got to take the smaller one. That's 15. Minus 5 is 10. Okay. Now we ask how much float is there for each activity, and we write the float in this section of the box here. Okay, the left-hand middle thing here. Now, float is the late start minus early start, or you can do the same thing. It's late finish minus early finish. So it's the bottom line minus the top line. Bottom line minus the top line. Okay. So 0 minus 0 is 0. Okay, same there. 5 minus 5 is 0. 20 minus 20 is 0. 10 minus 0. The bottom line minus the top line is 10. 15 minus 5 is 10. And here we have a float of 25 minus 5, 20 days. Okay, so let's just fill that in there. So that's our float, which means then our critical path is the set of activities that have 0 float, which is A, C, and F. All the others have float. So our critical path is A, C, F. Activities A, C, and F are critical. If you delay any of these activities, it's going to mess with this final project deadline of 30 days. It's going to screw it. However, you can mess with these because you've got 10 days of float, and this one you can be even more relaxed because you've got 20 days of float. So what does that look like on the Gantt chart? Working backwards, we've got activity E, as I said. It can start on the last day of the project. Sorry, the 26th day of the project. It's called 25 on the analysis, and it will be finished on day 30. It doesn't affect. So it has actually got a float time of all of this here. From the start of it here, it's got 20 days of float. You can start it on day 6, but you can also start it on day 26 and the project won't be affected. Then we've got activity D, has also got float, and we said it's got 10 days. It can start here, but it can also move to day 16. Okay. So there's float to play with on this activity, and then there's float to play with on B as well. There's also 10 days here to play with here, and it won't delay the project. If we took longer than that for B, if we delayed it further and it pushed out to say here, what's dependent on B? D is. Then D would get shifted out 2 days. And F would then get shifted out 2 days, and it would only end on day 32, which would be a problem. So you can't take 12 days to get this thing finished. You've got 10 days of lead of float time, no more. And by the way, if you use up float time on a sequence of activities, and on one of the activities, if you use up all the float, then the float for that whole series is used up. You can't add, let me just go back to this here. You can't, like this 10 and this 10 is the same 10 days. You can't add those two together and say you've got 20. You don't. If you use up 5 of the 10 here, you've lost them here, and you've only got 5 left there. So the float, as we've said, is when a task has an interval between its earliest and latest possible start date. It's the period by which a task can be late in inverted commas without affecting the total project duration. And the critical path is the shortest direct route to the end of the project. It's the path of tasks which have no float. Okay. So the critical path, as we said, is A. It's got 0 there. C, 0 float. F, got 0 float. Set of activities with 0. Okay, so that would be your Gantt chart. If you want to, here's another one you can use, but let me not dwell on that. And as I said, you've got, I think I chatted through this, if you've got a whole bunch of different activities, this would be a brainstorm for a work breakdown structure for opening a new restaurant. You've got to think about all of these things: buying stuff, equipment, furniture, decor, whatever, recruiting waiters. If you put all of that into a Gantt chart, I've said this is not a good Gantt chart. If your Gantt chart looks like this, you're going to fail your Gantt chart question. You know, it's just cascading one after the other. There's no links actually showing between the activities, and it just, in reality, no project would actually look like this. Okay, I'm highlighting this because I've had students in the past submit Gantt charts that look like this, and it's no good. That is not a proper Gantt chart. In reality, it would look, you know, my version of it would look something a bit like this. Site approval. Following on site approval, you've got your health and safety permissions, decor, furniture, external signage, advertising, buy the equipment, recruit the chefs and train them, recruit the waiters and train them, food purchases, opening of the restaurant. Now, I mean, obviously, this is a very simplified thing, but I'm just doing it for the purposes of showing you what's required and the way that you link the activities to each other. Okay, and then having done that, you would do your network diagram. Here's a network diagram for it, and as I said, for your project, you can take a portion of your whole project and do it to look like this. This is just a note. You'll see here it shows that this line jumps over. There's another one where it jumps over. Here's another one where it jumps over. And you would take a portion of this and do the network diagram for it. So you could say if this takes 4 days, and this takes 3, and this takes 2, and that takes 7, and so on. Take a portion of the project and work out your early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and then you would have your float time calculated into there once you've done your critical path analysis. And then what they say is show how changing something, if that was say 4 days, 2 days, and this was 3 days and 7 days, if that changed from 3 days and it became 6 days, then what would happen? Would this become critical and this would no longer be critical, depending on how you do the calculation? Okay, any questions on network diagrams and Gantt charts before I go on to the risk question from the final task of the POE? Any comments or queries from anyone?
All good, thanks, Tim.
Cool stuff.
All good, thanks, Tim.
Great. Good stuff, guys. Thanks. Okay. Great. Let me just check something here. Just want to check that we are cool. Okay, let's go back and just do the last. There's like 4 more slides just to highlight for the risk register. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up in terms of this main question for the last task. It says to us we must create a risk register. Okay, so create a risk register for giving a minimum of 3 risks for each of the categories listed below. Now there are 5 categories, so actually you're going to be doing this analysis for a total of 50, you must have at least 15 risks. Okay, so a minimum of 3 risks for each of the categories listed below: financial, scheduling, performance, operational, and external hazard risks. So what are some examples around that? Financial risks are direct financial impact on the budget. So that might be something like foreign exchange changes or a change in interest rate, or really your client coming to you and saying your budget has been cut, or a key resource on your project charging you more than you had expected, more than you banked on. Okay, so that's financial risk. Scheduling risk is a direct impact on the deadline of the project. That's usually just something taking longer than you anticipated, a delay in deliveries or something like that. Performance risk, and by the way, performance risk and operational risk overlap a great deal, and I'm not going to get fussy about which risk falls into which category, provided it makes sense that the examples you're giving, I'm just trying to say it can get confusing between performance and operational, and I'm not going to fuss about it being one way or the other. Performance risk might involve poor implementation and or processes, like poor workmanship, failing to deliver to specification. Operational risk might involve a lack of resources, including human resources, such as key skilled staff not being available when you were expecting them to be available. That would be an operational risk. And then external hazards might be weather or, change in government laws or something like that. Now, see pages 166 to 167 for more detail about the risk register. That's of the textbook. And please, I would suggest you do some basic Googling, okay? Google some stuff around risk and use some of these keywords around risk to give you a bit of an idea about stuff. You'll get good input very quickly with a bit of Googling. And then obviously reference it correctly. And that's something I haven't included tonight, but it's really important. I'll just mention that again at the end. So the following information should be included in your register. Your ID, this is just a number. Like the number on your work breakdown structure, it's a risk number. So just make up numbers for that. A description of the risk. So what is the thing that might go wrong? Now, what is the trigger? In the assignment paper, it asks what's the trigger, and that's not a Winnie the Pooh character from A.A. Milne. It's the trigger we're looking for and the probability. So it says what gives rise to the risk and what is the chance of it happening, and that's a score out of 10. The impact of the risk, what is the consequence of this risk if it happens, and a score out of 10. And therefore you get a threat score. This is a calculation based on a combination of probability and impact. And then what is the mitigation? What are you going to do to either prevent the risk from happening and deal with the consequences of the risk if it does happen? And you would focus on the risks with high scores. So let me give you a quick example. Here's the financial category of risks, exchange rate fluctuations. What is the trigger and probability? The trigger is any significant international event might trigger it, and I've given it a score. The probability is the chance of it happening. I've given that a 7 out of 10. There's a pretty high chance that something will happen that will affect the exchange rate. What will the impact? A very high score, 8 out of 10, because it, if it's a major change in the exchange rate, then it might impact severely on the project in terms of the project budget. That's if this project involves buying a lot of stuff from overseas, for example. So the score is 7 times 8 is 56. What's the mitigation or treatment? Keep an eye on international events and buy hedge fund foreign exchange if needed. In other words, you buy foreign exchange up front at a rate that you know, and then you keep that foreign exchange for later in the knowledge that the rand might get weaker, so you buy it a bit earlier while it's still stronger. If you're buying dollars off the rand, for example. Here's an external hazard. I've just given 2 examples. The one is a financial. This is an external hazard. Bad weather disrupting the event. What's the trigger and probability? There's a 3-day forecast indicates severe rain. I've said there's a 4 out of 10 chance of that happening, because let's say we're having this event in Joburg or Durban winter when it doesn't rain very much, except towards the end of May when we have floods. Because of global warming, but in an ideal world, it's a low score for severe rain. What is the impact? It's quite a high impact. What's the score? 7 times 4 is 28. Then our mitigation treatment. If it triggers, if we get a 3-day forecast indicating severe rain, then we will set up stretch tarpaulin coverings and gazebos for the entrance to our event. Okay, so I'm just giving you the principle behind. You have to do this for at least 15 risks. 3 under each category. What is the ID, the number, and description of the risk, the trigger and probability, the probability being a score. Trigger is what makes that risk happen, what would give rise to that risk. What is the impact or consequence? Is it going to have a high, medium, or low impact, out of 10, score out of 10. Score is the calculation, and then what are you going to do to deal with that risk? Either to prevent it happening, which in some cases you can't do, like the weather. You can't control the weather. Sadly, none of us can, and work from there. Oops, sorry. Okay. Now, I must just wrap up by emphasizing, very importantly, the need for correct referencing. I'm going to be more strict this time with referencing. If there are no in-text references, or there's no list of references at the end of your submission, then you will get penalized quite seriously for that. So I am going to be more strict on referencing, and so make sure, and like when you do this risk table, although you're making up all these risks, where did you get this risk table from? Okay, in other words, just reference the textbook or some website that you found this this risk table, or an example of this risk table. Where did you learn about mitigation and treatment of risk? Again, you would reference a website you've looked at or the textbook. So you just put underneath or at the beginning of this table a simple in-text reference for that. Similarly with a Gantt chart, or with the Gantt chart, you would reference, the easiest and best reference is Team Gantt for the layout of it. Where did you learn about the Gantt chart? You learned about it probably in the textbook, or you did some Googling on it, reference a website that you used. Okay, so there must be in-text referencing for certainly most of the questions, and there must be a list of references of at least 3 references, and it must be in alphabetical order by the name of the author or organization that wrote that article or book. Okay, so that's the, in a nutshell, guideline around referencing. Any questions on anything now to do with the assignment? Anything you want to ask or check before we part ways?
I don't think I've got anything on my side, Tim.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Ilana. You saying all good. You'll email if there's any hassles. Don't email me on, at 2 in the morning on Sunday night. because it's due Monday evening at 9 p.m. and that'll be too late. Good, yeah, you get my sarcasm. Thanks. So cool stuff, guys. Well done. Well done for participating. Sorry, it's kind of been a repeat, but I like to go through stuff a few weeks before it's due and then kind of do a repeat. And we have to do a national support session a week in front of the due date. So hence the repetition, and rather we repeat. And there's been some great questions tonight from somebody. And I just hope the rest of the class download this and listen, because you know, I'm giving away a great deal in these sessions. If you haven't taken the time to either be here, so well done to you guys, or to listen to the recording, you're doing yourself, I mean, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but you're just making life more difficult for yourself, because I've given away a lot in terms of what can make it a bit easier for you to put stuff together.
Yeah, no,
Good stuff,
definitely.
Shanice. Thanks. Well done. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
Maurice, you said?
no problem. Yeah, no, I'm saying the collab recordings helped me a lot with, you know, just putting together everything. And
Great.
tonight I've got a bit more clarity on what needs to be done. Thanks,
Magic.
Tim.
Okay, and just one last thing is, you know, if the critical path analysis is really screwing with your head, just take a small section and try and work it out that way. Small section of your project. And
just
you
to
know,
make
it's
it a
not
bit
a
easier.
substantial number of marks in the bigger scheme of things. So
Yeah.
just keep a perspective. Don't get completely phased by that and think it's going to screw your whole assignment. In fact, it's out of the whole semester and all of the marks going into this assignment, it's quite a small chunk of marks.
Yes. Yeah, no,
So,
I've been focusing more on my work breakdown structure, the Gantt chart, and the budget.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, no, great
Good
stuff.
stuff.
Thank you so much, Tim. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Maurice.
Cheers,
Thanks to the rest of you guys.
Thanks.
Well done. Keep up the good
Bye-bye.
work, and we'll see you next time. Okay. Down.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, you guys are free to leave, and thanks from my side.